Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining me. I'm Patrick here at YogaRenew. And in this video, we're going to talk a little bit about the concept of teaching to a peak pose. First, we'll start with a history of peak pose yoga, where it comes from, how do we apply it? And then we'll look specifically at a few instances in which your peak poses can be directly applied to different levels of classes and different situations. And it really all starts with the modern yoga master, Krishnamacharya, who is alive and teaching in the early 1900s. He built his classes around this concept called Vinyasa Krama. And the definition of Vinyasa Krama, according to Krishnamacharya's son, Desikachar, is that every single class should have a clear beginning, middle, and end, leading towards a peak or an apex in a given session. And leading up to that apex or peak pose, you start with simpler poses, building towards more complex poses. And in fact, we still use this definition today when we apply this peak pose concept while teaching our classes. Typically, we choose from 4 main categories of peak poses: standing poses, backbends, arm balances, and inversions. This isn't to say that you can't design your classes around other categories like abdominal poses or forward folds, but we typically choose from the big 4 because they're the categories of poses that your students will get the most excited by. In fact, Krishnamacharya, way back in the 1900s, used this very concept to get his students reinterested in yoga. In fact, he would bring his most advanced practitioners and his prized pupils into these public squares and gather around a big crowd. And then he would have these students perform the most advanced poses that you could think of: handstands, backbends, arm balances. And simply by the people in this square watching this, they would get so excited about the idea of yoga. In fact, it's what inspired them, many of them, to start their own yoga practice. And some of us still do this today. When you scroll on social media and see your favorite yoga teacher doing poses that you yourself are inspired by or want to hopefully one day accomplish, it does the same thing. It brings people back to their mats and inspires them to get into their yoga practice. So we're going to look now at some specifics on the 4 categories of poses that we like to build our classes around, and we'll start with standing poses. Quite honestly, standing poses are my most favorite category of poses to work on. They're foundational, they work the entire body. They're the category of poses that most likely not only you and your students are going to practice your entire life. So in a beginner level class, building your classes towards a peak of standing poses is an excellent choice. In fact, poses like Warrior One, Half Moon Pose, and Revolve Triangle are just classic poses that your students will find not only safe and foundational and instructional, but also challenging. You can also teach standing poses in intermediate or advanced classes as the apex or the focus of the class. And when you do this, even though these poses are foundational, you can look at some of the more nuanced or detailed areas of the poses and then couple that with more advanced poses later on in class. Backbends as a category of peak poses are extremely important, especially for our modern lifestyle, where we sit in cars for long periods of time, we work at a computer or at a desk for long periods of time, and gravity just pulls us forward and down, forward and down, forward and down. And working on backbends as a peak or focus in one of your classes is a great way to reverse that, to improve posture, to uplift our mood and our spirits. And that's why I love focusing on backbends as one of the main categories of peak poses. And in fact, there's a backbend for every level of practitioner. In a level 1 class, the backbends that you approach are going to be simpler and less complex. You can look at locust pose, Shalabhasana, or you can look at camel pose, Ustrasana. And these are simple backbends that are challenging, open up the chest, improve posture, but accessible for level 1 students. And then, of course, the bigger backbends are great for intermediate and advanced level students. They take some of the foundational stuff that you learn in beginner level classes and build upon it. Backbends such as bow pose, Dhanurasana, or even Urdhva Dhanurasana, full wheel, and even King Dancer, Natarajasana, are great big back bends that not only open the chest, uplift the spirits, but of course, resist gravity and improve your overall posture. When students think of inversions, they typically think of one of two things. One being that, oh wow, this is what yoga really is, standing on your head. The other thing that students often think about when they think of inversions is the fear of going upside down. Either way, this category of poses is a great peak or apex to build your classes around. In fact, there's an inversion for every level of student and every level of class. In a beginner level of class, we can start to focus on poses like headstand prep or shoulder stand, but they need to be done with precision and safety and the use of props, because students need to feel confident and strong in their ability to eventually balance their entire body on their head. In more intermediate and advanced classes, we can start to work on the fuller expressions of headstand and shoulder stand, still with the use of props, but now bringing the legs fully over the head and going completely vertical. In addition, we start to work on handstand and forearm stand, and some of maybe even their bigger variations like scorpion pose in handstand and in forearm stand. The last category I want to look at is arm balances and how to build your classes towards a peak or apex around one of these challenging poses. Now, you might not right away think arm balances are accessible or a good choice for a beginner level class, but you would be surprised that there are plenty of arm balances that we can teach in all levels of classes. And the reason that arm balances are good as a peak pose category or a choice to build your class around is because they're strength building. They work on the strength of the upper body, the back, the chest, and the arms, but they also have many aspects that are good for flexibility in the hips and the hamstrings. In fact, level 1 classes, you can build your class around an arm balance like side plank, which you've probably done in some fitness classes or even in a physical therapy office. It's a great strength builder, but also it can be modified down from its full expression. You can bring your knee down to the floor. You can scissor your feet. You can step one foot forward and still work on a lot of the great benefits that side plank has to offer in a beginner level class. And then as you start to progress into intermediate and advanced level classes, then we can start to weave in some of the more challenging arm balances like crow pose or side crow, in which you have a deep fold of the knees and the legs, and of course, lifting your body off the floor. And then the advanced arm balances become even more complex because maybe there's a twisting component, or the leg is over the shoulder, or the shin is on the forearm. All these poses are integrated with the concept of floating above the ground. So again, arm balances might be a challenging choice, but it's a great choice, and there is an arm balance for every level of class that you teach. Finding poses from one of these 4 main categories is a great way to get your students excited about yoga. In fact, you can pick a pose from any of these 4 categories, and it'll be useful for your students. If you want to work on posture, you might pick a back bend. If you want to work on strengthening, maybe you pick an arm balance. If you want a general class that really gets your students grounded through their feet and feeling their entire body, maybe you pick a standing pose. The point is, this is a great way to build your classes that are all-encompassing, that keep your classes focused but exciting, and most importantly, bringing your students back to class time and time again. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, definitely like and subscribe to our channel. If you have any questions or comments, drop them down below. Also, if you want to explore this concept of peak pose yoga even further, check out our Vinyasa Yoga sequencing course taught by me over at YogaRenew.